In my chapter review, I thought that Nemesis was part of Emu's Trinity of Power. But listen, that turned out to be wrong. I was definitely wrong there. And the official translation clears this up. Nemesis is the name of the blade he conjures using Omen to stab right through Loki. Now, he can transform his weapon into other things as well. We saw a mace, we saw the sword. So I don't know if Nemesis is the name of the technique in general that Emu's using through Omen to alter his weapon, or if it is the specific name of the blade. In any case, he used it to stab right through Loki. And boy, did it look painful. I also had mentioned in the review that the sword style and pose, and even the sword itself, may somewhat hint towards a connection between Mihawk and the celestial dragons, which I actually think is a fairly prominent theory. So in Greek mythology, Nemesis is the child of Nyx, which means night. Mihawk's blade is called Yoru, which also means night. So there is at least some level of connection here. Another notable feature in both Mihawk and Emu is their eyes. Their eyes are very nearly the same, sporting that multiple ring, Rinnegan almost looking pattern. While they are not the only individuals in the story with eyes like this, it could still strongly hint towards some amount of lineage between them. Perhaps even the chance of Mihawk being part of the Nerona family. Maybe the sword style he uses comes from the family line itself, and perhaps it has been around for a lot longer than Mihawk. Yoru itself also looks like a blade that could have been around for a long time, and it's certainly fancy pants enough that it could have once resided in the Holy Land. Now, while none of this is even close to being concrete, it might also explain how his rivalry with Shanks began, right? If they both, in one way, shape, or form, defected from the Holy Land. Now, we learned of a snippet of Mihawk's past through SBS Volume 106. In it, we are told that in the past, he experienced a great betrayal at the hands of the Marines, and so he holds a grudge against them. Now, while it is believable that a member of the Celestial Dragons would associate with the Marines, I really cannot imagine them betraying one and getting away with it. So if Mihawk is a member of the Nerona family, or even tied to the Celestial Dragons at all, I suspect he would have already defected by this point, or like Shanks, had been separated from them at a young age. Again, we really truly do not have much to go off of here, and we also know so little about Mihawk's past that I thought it was at least a fun idea to explore. With that, let's connect back to Emu's power. So while we have established that Nemesis is part of Emu's ability set, it is not an aspect of the Trinity or Trifecta that makes up Domination. So what does it actually consist of? Well, before we get to that, let's talk a little bit more about his comment on Omen or Maki, whatever you want to call it. He refers to it as his military might. Along with this, he says that it is a power which lurks or resides in all things. And for a bit of a potential connection to this, in SBS Volume 113, in response to a question asked about Vegapunk, Oda mentioned that because greed, pride, and desire are all inherent parts of human nature that exist within nearly all beings on the One Piece world, on Blue Planet, it means that within nearly everyone, there is a potential to become a celestial dragon. So I kind of can't help but wonder if this was in some way, right, or some part, somehow a method of Oda hinting towards Maki or Omen. This really does make me think that it exists as an opposing force to Maki and Haki. Haki, which we also have been told exists within all things. But while Haki, aside from conquerors, can be unlocked by anyone, I think based off what Imu tells us, it is likely that Maki has more restrictions, which make it not as accessible as Haki. In fact, it is possible that outside of Imu, the Gorosei, the God's Knights, and probably individuals who are Domi Reversi'd, Maki has been all but lost to the world. I mean, I still find it interesting how its abilities seem closer to a Devil Fruit, but at the same time, it really does mimic attributes of Haki. One example of this, which I also missed in the chapter review, is when Loki uses Ragna Izuchi and Imu meets it head-on, neither of their attacks are touching. Like, there is a clear, defined gap between both of their moves. And yet the Black Lightning is spewing everywhere, and this makes it look exactly like a high-level Conqueror's Haki Clash, even though we can presume what Imu is using here is strictly Omen. So we don't know if he's pairing Haki with Omen yet, or if Omen Maki is just doing everything in which Imu is, displaying. So let's examine how this fits into the power we learned about in the chapter, which is Domination. So according to Imu, it is in the nature of man to crave strength, to crave power. Through these cravings and 3 distinct steps, one can achieve such power. And the first step is corruption. The example we are given for this one by Oda is Domi Reversi, and it is the easiest for Imu to inflict, while also resulting in the smallest power gain. He states this corruption comes from an individual's lust for power being too easy to achieve. Initially, I thought that Luffy and Loki's resistance to Domi Reversi was because of their devil fruits. And we shouldn't rule that out entirely, but it might be simpler than that, or at least more inherently tied to who they are as people. As Loki demonstrates to us in spades in this chapter, neither of them crave power in that specific way. Have they become strong? Yes, absolutely. I mean, Luffy's a Yonko. We know he's a powerhouse. Loki is potentially even stronger. I would not say that's a stretch of the imagination. So they both became very powerful, but not by taking the easy path. So it is possible that an individual who does not have that specific type, form, craving, or lust for power may be immune or more resistant to Domi Reversi. I would find this cool because it would open up the possibility for even more regular people to not be affected. Like, it wouldn't gatekeep the resistance to Domi Reversi strictly to special devil fruits. This does bring up some questions about the Giants of Elbaf, because they were all affected, but it would also provide a route for them to learn something. Now, many of us want Usopp to have another big moment here on Elbaf, or arguably his main big moment here on Elbaf. So perhaps that could be tied in with this in some way, either directly or indirectly, but basically through his actions, through him being a brave warrior of the sea. Now, if you like my videos, or you like what I'm doing here, or you just like my beard, I invite you to please like and subscribe, and maybe even hit that bell icon. Not only do I greatly appreciate it, but it is very important for small channels. Next up comes the Covenants, which we see through the God's Knights and the Gorosei. Rather than being forced upon someone like Domi Reversi, the Covenant comes about from an individual choosing servitude out of their own self-interest. I think this might give us a small hint towards why Imu operates in the way that he does. Now, I've often wondered why the Celestial Dragons, mainly the Gorosei, because the rest are lazy and don't care, and the world government are sometimes more passive than one might expect them to be. Story reasons aside, one example of this is letting Luffy reach the point he has it all. Now, I get that Blue Planet is huge, much larger than Earth, and that the world government has limited resources, but you'd still think that if somebody like Luffy popped up and you knew about it, that he would become a major priority. Now, we do know Imu felt as though this was all already set into motion, and so that perhaps resisting it was futile. But I think another side of this might be because rather than ruling entirely through, say, Dami Reversi, what he really wants is for high-ranking individuals or leaders to follow him willingly, sometimes maybe begrudgingly, but willingly nonetheless, thus bringing the masses in tow. We can see this with the way the world government is set up, right? Like, think about how if you're a kingdom, or if you're the king of a kingdom, and you want the protection of the Marines, you must become a member nation of the world government and pay the celestial tax. Well, that could be viewed as a form of covenant being made with Imu that does not detract from the limited number of contracts he can hand out. Because not all kings are powerhouses like Harald that are leading the giants, right? And so Imu's system has set up extra ways for people to, quote unquote, willingly enter into a contract for power, but that expands beyond what he can do with just the covenants. So, and speaking of Harald, we see this with how Imu gave him the number of chances and pushes he needed to make the leap. In the chapter, I suggested that Imu's power or longevity might increase with the more people he makes covenants with, while the number is limited, even with taking into account the cost he said that he must pay for it. But for this to work, I believe he needs to have full control over how the covenant is initiated and concluded. So we're going back to the contracts here. We can see this with the differences between what happened when Harald went out and what happened when Saturn went out. Imu was clearly perturbed and was experiencing major drawbacks when Harald was killed by Loki, but he was chilling with a whiskey when he sucked the power out of Saturn on his own. So those two scenarios, they are not the same. In any case, after this covenant is made, Imu can then grant the final tier of power to those who accept it, which is Omen, which is probably a fuller range of Omen. Based off the reaction from Sommers and Killingham, we could already be fairly certain that Covenant holders know what Omen is. In fact, we even see early signs of its use through Shamrock and Gunko. And in the chapter, Imu sets that in stone for us by saying that after the contract is made, the individual unlocks the power of Omen. And I now think that all things that Imu can do or grant, like the majority of the effects we see his power achieving, come from or go through Omen. And one example of this, just to give one, is regeneration, which we do actually see at all three levels, but to different extents, right? So individuals who have been Dami Reversi'd can regenerate, but if they take enough damage, or if they take fatal damage, the Dami Reversi, the recovery cannot overcome that. And so they are either pushed out of it like Rox was, or outright reverted like Dory and Bragi. Deep Sea Covenant holders, like I suspect the God's Knights are, look to have a more robust recovery ability. Like, take Sommers, right? He was absolutely fatally annihilated by Luffy and Loki. Under normal circumstances, there would have been no coming back from that. But because they have like a core, seemingly, right? Since he has that steel heart that wasn't damaged, he was able to regenerate from that massive amount of damage. And then moving into the Depths Covenant, which I expect the Gorosei to have, I suspect this is where that recovery factor also grants eternal youth, or what we perceive as eternal youth, like with Imu himself or what Gunko seems to have, or, in the case of the Gorosei, being frozen at the age in which they received it. What is left to be seen is if Covenant holders can utilize Omen to the same extent as Imu or not. But with these 3 abilities, no, with our powers combined, Captain Plant... No, wait, that's not right either. It seems these 3 things together form Domination, which according to Imu is the only true bliss in the world. Then we get the flashback, which is actually Imu and Joy Boy. And I don't know. It seems like this might hint towards Joy Boy once having agreed with or utilized domination in his own way, or maybe had his own form of domination. Because this is the point when Imu gets real tilted and yells out Joy Boy's name. This does make me wonder, where did domination as a power originate? Did Joy Boy or the Ancient Kingdom have it first, and Imu commandeered it? Does it come specifically from his devil's fruit, and was used to counter the Ancient Kingdom in some way? There is certainly more going on here than meets the eye. Now, in this video, somewhere here, I go over how I believe devil fruits were created as humanity's response to Imu's devil's fruit. Perhaps Haki was developed in response to Maki, and that their differences stem from being the manifestation of different ideas or sources, being demonic power and willpower. And yeah, that's the video. I would love to hear your thoughts and ideas on this, or what you think of what I said, or if you have some other theory entirely. Take all of those thoughts, right? And what you do is you put them in the comments below. And then we can have further discussion and see what everyone is saying. So with that, I would like each and every one of you to have an excellent rest of your day.